And the training, the whole series will be recorded, and every day after the training, you will get the link, email with a link to the slides that were presented and to the recording. So you don't need to record, you don't need to memorize everything, it will be shared with you. Okay, so let's start with short introduction. And please let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, perfect. So my name is Martin. I joined Oro team 3.5 years ago. I started being a developer, and then I was project lead. And since last 2 years, I'm the trainer. And this is the training that will be delivered right now. It's called Oro Fundamentals. And what are the objectives of this training? First of all, it's for you to understand the application development we have and some principles we take into consideration. Most important thing, it will also reduce your time that is required for onboarding. If you already installed Oro and you take a brief look at the source base, the code base, you realize that this is quite big and there is a lot of code and a lot of entities and everything to learn about actually. We also talk about some best practices that we use in Oro, and we recommend you to use them. Side effect of this training, and mostly of today's training actually, it will be to show you how we develop on daily basis. You will see the tools we use, how we configure our IDE, and how we debug the application, and so on. Now, what is the process? I will try to show you as much examples as possible. They will be also included in the slide, but I will switch a lot to IDE and then show you them from the code perspective. Here on the Zoom, there is a chat that you see that you are using, and also there is a question and answer panel. Please use this one if you have any questions about the topics we are discussing right now. And if there will be any questions I can answer immediately, I will answer them right after every topic. Otherwise, I will note them down and there will be answers day after, or at the end of the training on day 6, there will be like longer Q&A session when you can spend more time on discussion. Depending on the day, we will have one 15-minute break after like 1.5 hours, or 2 10-minute break after every topic. And the slides will be shared with you. After each presentation, each webinar, you should have an email. There will be a link to a slide, and also there will be a link where you can find the recording day after the session. So it will not be available immediately, but day after it should be there. And here is the link to the channel, but it will also be in the email that you receive. And one more important thing, there is a Slack channel. This is designed especially for this training. Here you can click the link or the QR code, and this will take you to the channel where you can ask any question. I saw that you have some issues with the installation, with the Vagrant, or getting environment ready on Mac. So in this channel, it actually leads to our Oro community Slack channel called Free Online Training. I will be there. There is also Andrei Yatsenko who can help with any questions you have. So please feel free to post your questions there. Or if they are questions to the thing I present, you can also post them here in question and answer tab. Okay, so the plan for today is to first talk about the development environment. So how we configure our IDE, what plugins do we use, what extensions. And then we'll talk about general principles. So there are concepts what we took when we designed Oro that we use when we use Oro on daily basis. Then we should have a break, like 15-minute break, and we will briefly talk about the testing, how we do it in Oro and how we recommend you to go with it. And at the end, we start the development part. So we talk how we can extend Oro, so how we can extend Symfony, but also how we can extend Oro, because this is not always the same. And at the end of each theory, we will have the short practice. So I will present you the practice, and day after, I will start the day from presenting the solution to the practice. So if you want to do the practice yourself, it's awesome. You will then compare if it is similar to our solution or why it's different. Otherwise, you can just follow our solution and find out if this is enough for you to learn or you need something more. Okay, so start screen sharing. Okay, I will stop the video right now and only share the slide from now on. So this is the development environment. And if you have any question, let me just check question and answers tab if you already have any questions. I can take this. Q&A. No, there are no questions. Please let me know on the chat if you can see this tab and you can ask any questions there. Because yeah, you are all muted. You cannot share the video. You can only post the questions there, or use the chat, or use the Slack channel in our community. Okay, perfect. So development environment, and this is really crucial, guys. Oro is a huge application. Symfony itself is a huge framework, and having well-configured IDE is something that speeds up the process. It makes your experience much better. It's less frustrating, and it's just more fun. So the goal will be to understand of the basic tools that we use and share the approach how we develop applications, okay? So first of all, we all in Oro use PhpStorm IDE, and we really recommend you to do the same. And we use this actually for nearly everything right now. So I used to work with MySQL and the Postgres, and I was using the Workbench for MySQL and the pgadmin for the Postgres databases. Right now, I use only or mostly only the IDE for this. So if I have my IDE, you should be able to see it right now. I can connect to database here, and if you have a lot of connectors, it can be any database actually that you're probably gonna use. So it's connector for Postgres, there is connector for MySQL, and you can install additional adapters. Okay, I have a chat information that, guys, you cannot see anything. Is it true, or this is just some specific? Oh, okay, perfect. Now it's okay. Okay, yeah, you should be able to see my ID right now. So really recommend, even for databases here, I can have many connections. And if I work with database, it's easy to look for something like order, and then with arrows, I go up and down, see the tables. If I open the tables with control click, I can even navigate through the foreign key. Really good. And also it knows the application structure, so it helps you a lot with the queries. Then pretty obvious, it's a lot of auto-completion being suggested for you. We're gonna talk about this in a moment. We use it for code standard checks and also for code version control. Not all of us, I prefer using Git, for example, from the console, but still the majority use the Git from the IDE. We use it for debugging, and this is like crucial. We use it for test. We have some additional plugins installed that you're gonna actually see how we install them and how we configure them in a second. By the way, sometimes I tend to speak a little too fast or click too fast. If this is too fast for you, please just ping me in the chat, slow down, and I will. So first of all, we have Symfony plugin for PhpStorm. Okay, so here I can go to the settings. If I have the Symfony plugin installed here, I can enable this. And if I search for Symfony, this is how we configure. So we enable the plugin, and this is not the default one, so you can pay attention right now. So we change the path to the translations. The app directory should be empty, and the web directory is public. Once you set this up, you click apply. If this is the first time you enable the plugin, you would have to restart your IDE. And it is really important to have it installed. And why is it like this? So for example, it will give you a lot of hints about the entities. So here I have some controller, and I would like to get something from the repository, for example. So I get the doctrine helper we're gonna talk about, and then I can look for the entity, and he will give me the hints about all the entities or the classes I can use. Here, for example, I have brand entity, and I get the class. And despite the fact that actually if I go to the brand, you can see there is no repository for this. He knows the Symfony structure, so he will be able to give me the hints about the magic methods available for the repositories. So I can find one, find all, and they are available for me. Those are small things, but if you develop a lot, this fasten up a lot. And the same goes with the templates autocomplete. Here, for example, I would like to change the template. I don't need to go to the Oro code base, which, as you can see, I can open. There is a lot of packages. In every package, there is a lot of bundles, and it's difficult to find the template. But if I know, for example, that I need something from Oro user bundle, I can just start typing. And let's say I can then go with the arrows and pick the one I'm looking for. So it's not only here. If I go to the template, it will also give me the hints. For example, here I have the view bundle, and I would like to extend some other template. I click Control Space. By default, it's Control Space, and it will give me the hints about available templates. The same goes with the roots. I can get routing and then redirect, and he will give me the hints about the root names. So you see this a name. There is a lot of controller. Reminding all of the roots is really difficult, and he will just give you the list of them. And also, we work a lot with the translation. Every label in Oro should be translatable. And same, we can get a lot of help from the Symfony plugin. For example, we would like to get some label, so I can start typing, and he will give me already the hints. If I pick one that is existing, I can control-click it, and it will take me to the definition where it was configured. Another one, if I want to get translation key, I don't need to go through the tree and check it. I can click with right-click and copy the reference. And thanks to this, I will just have the translation key I needed. So just like this, and that's it. And also, if I would like to override this translation key inside of my bundle, I can open the translations. And I will not need to create the structure, because if I click at the beginning of the file and just paste it, he will make it for me, okay? So he already create all the indents I needed. And I will add some. And that's it. The other way, I could also define the new one. I can change it to tooltip. And he will give me the hint. Oh, actually, not the tooltip, but okay, some hint, let's call it. Okay, it's highlighted because the translation doesn't exist. So with Alt-Enter, I can click, and there will be some suggestions. First one will be to add translation. I click it, and he will just ask me to which file this translation should be added. I can pick the first one, and you will see that my hint was added to the translation and with correct indentations in the correct place in the tree. Otherwise, you will just need to check, and here it will be very simple, right? It's a very short file. But if you work with a file like this, it wouldn't be that simple and that fast. Okay, so this is why we really recommend the Symfony plugin. And on top of this, we also have Oro Plugin. So Oro Plugin gives you the similar functionality, but with the Oro specific functionalities. And as you will find out during the training and during the development, in Oro, we use a lot of YAMLs to configure the application. Those are specific YAMLs. They have to be placed in the correct places. And then Oro plugin will give you great help using them. Let's, for example, have this bundle. By the way, during the training, during the practice sessions, we will create one bundle and extend it, add additional functionalities, enable the APIs, add migrations, add some integrations, use the message queue, and it should all be joined in one bigger bundle, let's say. So we'll just develop step by step. And you can follow with me, do your own solutions, but also in the training repository, there are branches for each new topic. So you can just switch to another branch, check the changes so you can use the git compare functionality, upgrade the application, and go on and go on. So, for example, one of those YAM files I mentioned would be API YAM. Most of the Oro YAMs we put in the resources config Oro directory, and they have to be called properly. And thanks to this, they will be also auto-loaded. So I would like to enable NTI for entity. Right now, I can go to the docs and start searching how can I do this, copy some parts of code, and check. But also, I can use hints. I just click Control Space, and if the plugin is enabled and the YAM is in correct place, it will give me the hint what key can be used at this place of specific file. So I will start with API. Next one, I need to say if this is for entities, for example. Yeah, it is for entities. So he will give me the hint for the entities I can use. So let's go with the branch. And for the branch, I can define the form type, the actions, and so on and so on. He's also smart enough to use the indentation. So at this moment, I can define for which action I want to do some logic, to add some configuration. But also if I go back with indentation, I will have different hints. Okay, so depend where do you put your cursor, you will have hints for the specific level. So right now I'm getting the hints for the brand, so for the entity. And if I go one more indent, I will have the hints for this specific action. Okay, if I go to different YAM file, for example, data grids, which is also gonna use a lot and it's not that simple to configure, I will have the different hints. So for example, I need data grid. Here you need to know some logic. There is no suggestion because here you should type the grid name, which can be custom. So let's call it demo grid. And we are back with the annotations, with the suggestions. So we can say we would like to define the source. For source, the type. And here you also have the values hints. So we have some values that are defined by the implementing some interfaces, and we can pick one of those. Really, this will speed up a lot and save a lot of frustration. Okay, so really important. And actually, I should have started from showing you how to enable the plugin. So it's very similar to the Symfony plugin. We go to the settings. In the plugins, we search for Oro. There is Oro PhpStorm plugin. I think it's in the repository of PhpStorm plugins already. And also we can search for Oro here. And we have Oro Platform plugin. We just enable this and app directory is empty. Why this is not default values? Because this plugin was designed or created when we were in 2.6. And as you know, between 2.6 and 4.1 that we are talking about right now, we changed the Symfony version, and so the directories were changed. Okay, so it should be empty, and that's it. The same goes with the going from declaration to the action. So if we use services, we have functionality from the Symfony plugin. We can just navigate to the class. And the same way we could navigate to some other service that was just used. And here we can navigate to the service definition, going back and forth. And we have the same functionality for something called actions. We're gonna talk about this specific functionality on the last day when we talk about workflows. But here we can have some, for example, action definition. If I click it, I will go to the class that will be executed when this action is called. So this is not by the Symfony plugin, it's for Oro plugin. Okay. Next, we also use PHP code sniffer, and we check the coding standard for PSR2. So thanks to this, we have the same understanding and we use the same syntax and the same standard. And we are quite big team right now, so if everybody would use different standard, first of all, it will look like mess. And second of all, it will be difficult to customize it because every class will have different standard and will be not so easy to read the code. So how to enable it? I go to the settings again, and there is a thing called inspections. But first, inspections, and here I have the inspection, and those should be PHP, quality tools, and here there is a code sniffer. If I have it installed, I actually installed this globally with Composer Global install, and here we just enable this by this ticking here, and choose the standard. So we used PSR2, we applied it, and now our code will be checked. We can also configure that you cannot commit if you're gonna use the Git from the IDE, that you cannot commit if there are any warnings to the coding standards, which is very good. We have this check on IDE, but also we have the same check on code reviews. So for example, if you have automatic testing on the CI and the coding standard is not passed, you will have to fix your pull request. And so right now, if I do something that is against coding standard, like go with wrong indentation or something like this, okay, I have some highlights and the statement is empty body, or for example, there is no space. See, there are some issues from PHPCS. And it's very important to understand that this is not like you have to fix them. If for some reason you need to break them, sometimes it is okay, as long as you understand why you have to do this. So just ignoring them is never a good solution. But for example, if this is not your code, it's just a client for some API you just want to use and it was provided by third-party service, you can do this, and for example, you can ignore the file. So right now, you see, I have the information that PHPCS should be ignored for this file, and there are no highlights anymore. So it's not being checked. And also, if this is not the whole file, but just a chunk, just a few methods or even a part of the method, I can disable it for a specific chunk. So let's do this twice. And I can disable and enable it only for given part of the class. So you can see I have the same violation in both places, and here it's not being highlighted, and here it is. It's pretty simple. Of course, you should not disable it usually. You should just fix if there are any violations, but it is possible. And if you understand why you have to do this, sometimes there could be a reason. Now, Xdebug. I know a lot of developers, especially when they work with some Docker or Vagrant environments, don't like to use the Xdebug. It's not that simple to configure it, but it is crucial to have it working. If everything goes fine, you don't need it, and it's perfect. But when something goes wrong, there is a lot of redirection, there is a lot of classes, there is a lot of different providers tagged with the same tag. Sometimes it's difficult to find which provider are you using at this moment, and Xdebug is a huge help. It's not like obvious, but most of the Oro is single page application. So most of the redirects are done with the Ajax calls, and echoing something or just dying in specific places won't help you a lot. So it's really, really important for you to get Xdebug working. And it's also very important to disable it all the time when you don't need to debug something. So it should be installed and it should be disabled. When you encounter some problems, you enable this, you debug, and you should remember about disabling it back. Otherwise, simple operations like clearing the cache or even redirecting will take a lot of time, and it will just waste your time because in most cases you don't need it. So we use it for debugging. We don't use it for profiling. For profiling, we use Blackfire. It's free, it's very awesome. And we can also profile on the production thanks to this. And with Xdebug, we can also use it for remote debugging. To save you some time, we recommend adding some simple comments like X enabled, X disabled, which will just enable the Xdebug and restart your Nginx or PHP FPM. And just a quick script, because you can do this few times a day, and it will be just faster to do this with one line than writing few lines of code, of comments, sorry. And you can, of course, Xdebug in PhpStorm. So in Chrome, there are extensions, and you can enable the debugging. And also in Chrome, you can turn on the listening or turn off the listening. So let's do the quick test. And I have installed the application from the repository, from the training repository. And it should look like this in the backend with /admin, and something like this in the frontend, so without admin. And I can go to the users list. By the way, if you are not sure if your Xdebug is enabled, it's php-v, and you can see right now it's not enabled. I don't see it here, and sorry. And let's enable this. And here you can see that Xdebug is enabled at the time. So if you are not sure the application works kind of slow, please check if you did not forget about disabling the Xdebug. So here I can check what root is being loaded. So it's user controller index action. And let's open it. And class lookup by default is Ctrl-Shift-N. It's very convenient to use it. And if you don't see it, now it's also one important hint. So as you can see, I have the hints from the vendor. By default, you may not have them. It's because if you go to the settings, here you should have the directories section. And on the right, there are directories that are excluded from the caching, for indexing, sorry. And here, there will be a list of our directories. I did not remove those three, just to show you. And you see there are no X's here. It's actually UI. If I just make it a little bit narrower, I can see. So I should remove all the libraries that I want to use for indexing. So Oro should be all removed. I should also remove the Symfony or Doctrine or Tweak. So those classes I'm going to work with a lot, and I would like to have them indexed. I could do this for all the vendors, but then re-indexing will take more time and it will be just slower. So only those that you need to use, and I can apply. And thanks to this, those packages will be indexed, and I will have the hints for them. So this is user controller. I can make a breakpoint here. And then I should just refresh. And okay, I have the information on the second screen that it stopped, or it actually stopped in some other breakpoint, but you can see I can already debug. I see a lot of information about the stack trace. I see the information about the current values for the variables, and I can, for example, examine something. So I can just check what will be the result of this, evaluate the expression. I have the expression here, and I can evaluate it. Also, I can make conditional breakpoint, which is important if there is a loop and it loops through the 16,000 of strings, for example. Of course, clicking continue is not a good idea. So I can click here and add some condition. For example, stop only if specific variable have specific value, or the same, I can add watches. You can read a lot about the Xdebug, and really, really is crucial to have it installed and to start working with it whenever something goes wrong. Otherwise, it's going to be mundane to debug what's wrong. Okay, then if I don't want to debug anything, I just disable it. And that's it. Actually, I killed the request, so I just refresh it again. The same, as you will see, the big part of Oro is done asynchronously. And right now you see how I can debug the request from the browser, but also it's important to sometimes use the remote debugging and debug the command from the command line. For example, there is a lot of things done by the message queue, and the message queue is being consumed by the process that is started from CLI. So then I will just need to export this. You have this slide, so you don't need to memorize or copy this. But this is your server name, and the server name should be set here in the PhpStorm. And then you just enable Xdebug, and the same way you can debug the code that is executed from the console. Very important whenever you work with message queue. Okay, also the PHP unit is fully integrated with PhpStorm, so I can run the test, I can configure it first. So settings, I go with PHP unit, I think it was. Here's test frameworks, and I have two configurations. One for PHP unit, the second one is for Behats. We're gonna talk about this later today. And here I point, there is a PHP unit XML file in your repository. You just point it, and that's it. And right now, you can go, for example, to this user bundle. We already seen the controller, and there is a test directory, and there are unit tests. I can just right-click them and run. And you can see the super fast 422 tests were executed. I can check what tests were executed. And of course, you can use it from the console or from the automatic environment. But what is nice here that whenever such some tests fail, I can easily debug it. So I can open some tests. You can see I can run each test separately. Okay, but if I enable my Xdebug and put some breakpoint, I can debug it, and that's it. And now I just debug the whole test and check what's wrong, if the value is incorrect or it's the test incorrect, anything. As you can see, it's just a moment to enable it and start. Okay, let's just disable the Xdebug and continue. And also we use the mess detector, which helps you detecting the code smells or possible errors if there is too many different services used in one class and there is a lot of coupling. And again, it's in the inspections, just like the code sniffer. So we type inspection. Also, as the code sniffer, I installed this globally with Composer. You can install this different version per project. It's up to you. But you just enable this mass detection. We use all the rules. You also have additional rules online if you need, but I use just the custom ones, sorry, the default ones. And that's it. If I change something, I need to click apply, and it's enabled. And it will help you with code smell and everything. This can be also disabled, and it happens mostly for the entities. So mass detector will tell you there is too many public methods or too many properties. For entities, we know that we need those properties, we need those methods because those are usually setters and getters. So we agree that they need to be there, and we just can just ignore them. So for example, let's open the contact entity from the contact bundle. And as you can see at the top of the class, I have suppress wording for PHP mess detector. There are too many methods, for example, should be suppressed. If I remove it, I'm not sure if this will be fast enough. No, he will not check the, or is it now? Yeah, you see, I have warnings. So there is too many public methods, there is too many fields, and there is a lot of coupling between the objects. I notice it, it's just the entity, and I'm okay with it. So I can ignore it, but consciously. So I know why I need to ignore it. So if there is something wrong, first check if really it's wrong, or this is some bad design, or this is okay, and you can suppress the warnings. Now, one of the most important slides for this development environment. As you know, the PhpStorm is super helpful. It gives you a lot of hints. It's very good for searching for the codes or for the classes, and it's thanks to the index it's building. But some directories are rebuilt a lot, are being refreshed all the time, and if you're gonna have them in index, it will be very slow. It will be reindexing all the time, and your processor will be 100% used most of the time. So few directories should be excluded from the indexing. So first of all, cache. So right now it's in var, cache, right click, and here it will be marked as excluded. I have it excluded, so I have cancel exclusion. When you have it excluded, you can de-exclude the Oro entities subdirectory, because this is where cache for Oro entities is being built, and it's good to have it indexed. The same goes for the logs. You don't need to index logs. So here, right click and mark them as excluded. And most of the directories in your public. So here I have public, and bundles, for example, is builds the assets, builds the JS files. I don't need to index them, and they are being rebuilded, not all the times like cache, but still a few times. It's good to just mark them and just exclude them. Okay, so please check if you can configure IDE like this, so exclude those directories, enable those plugins, and make sure your hints works. Otherwise, you will spend a lot of time that you don't need to waste. If something is not working and you check the plugins, my first guess always is that you forgot, or actually I did it many times, to go to the directories that I show you and de-exclude vendor Oro, vendor Symfony, or Doctrine from the excluded files. Once you have this, you should open some class and you should see the hints. For Symfony, you should open some YAM file and you should see the hints for the YAMs, just like this. So please make sure you have this. If you don't, try to enable this. Contact on the community. There is Andre, as I told you, but also the community is very active, and somebody for sure will give you a hand, and it's important for your experience. Next thing is installing the assets. Whenever you develop application, you should do this with symlinks. So there's a comment, and you just install this with symlink, and thanks to this, the assets that are generated and being kept in bundles. Oro user, for example. Okay, so those are just links to the assets in your bundles. So whenever you change something in the bundle, you don't have to rebuild the assets. You should do this for development. You should never do this on production. On production, the assets should be a separate files. And whenever you want to rebuild them, you just run this command again. The second command is Oro asset builds, which calls the webpack and build all the assets. In the productions, they will be minimized, so it will be difficult to debug anything. And we will not talk about assets a lot during this training. We'll talk, or you will hear a little about it during the training about the OroCommerce, where we will talk about front store of the application a little bit more. And one that is really important, and it's better to do it now than after you already regret it. So your environment, your development environment, should never send real emails. You should have some mail cacher, or there is Mailtrap, or probably dozen different services that catches your emails. So of course, when you start development, you have some fixtures, dummy emails, and it's safe. But at some point, you will be asked to debug some issues from the production, and after checking the code, you will find out that this is data issue. You will sanitize the database, for sure, because you shouldn't use the production database locally. Get it locally and start debugging. There is always a risk there will be some real email in the database, and you will send the test email with some dummy text. We all know that we use dummy text in development, and you will send it to a real partner. It may be a small issue, but still it's not looking good. So it's very simple to install this and configure. I use Mailcatcher. You can use whichever service you prefer. So right now I can open it. It has some browser interface, and I can go to the application and try to send some email. And by the way, here is a configuration. So it's SMTP transport, and the port is 1025. You put this to your parameters YAM. So here I have the config, I have parameters YAM, and there is a mailer transport settings. Okay, by default, I think the transport will be mail, which could use the PHP mail, and you would really send an email. You don't want this. And so here I can open some lead. By the way, the application you see is just the training repository installed with the fixtures, demo data fixtures. And here I can send an email. So it's good to have such a test once you have the development environment ready. As you can see, email is here. So it was not sent, and it just stopped and catched by the mail catcher. I can see the headers, I can see the body title, anything I want. So it's good enough. And some extras. So this actually can be different for any developers, but here locally, plenty of us are using Terminal for the console. It's the one that you've seen when I was using the Xdebug. I can have many windows here. I can split them, I can move them. I can run a command in all of them using the super G. So for example, if I want to test something on message queue, it's always good to run few consumers, because message queue should be tested if it works well using in simultaneously threads. And also there is something called profiles. And this is like the ugly one. But whenever I log into the server, to the production especially, I just change the profile for this specific tab. So I know that whatever I do in this window, I should be extra cautious, okay? And whenever I switch back, I just log out of the production and I'm back with the normal window. So this is something nice. I also configured to work with F12, just pop up. Another one, if you ever debug the Symfony from the logs, you know that Symfony usually is really verbose about the exceptions and everything. So the logs are really long and there is a lot to read. So it's very good to just grab for the error or critical. So something like this. And it will be tailing the logs, but only for the error or critical bugs. So it will be way easier to find what's problem. And scripts for tedious tasks. So for example, it can be for enabled or disabling Xdebug, as you saw. I also, because I work with many versions of Oro at the moment, I have few projects still being on 2.6 and few projects on 4.1. I also work with 3.x, so there is a lot of different conditions. And for example, 2.6 use different Elasticsearch version than 4.1. So I do not have them as a service. I instead just have the shortcuts like S2 start or S6 or S7 start. And this will just start the correct Elasticsearch service for me. And I don't need to kill the previous and stuff. It will be just here in the thread. At the end of each topic, I will be having some short best practices. This is just a summarization of what we talked about. So use Xdebug. Please make sure you have it configured. Otherwise, debugging will be really a pain. And also, please make sure it is disabled when you are not using it. Otherwise, it will be just way slower for you. Then write some shell scripts. The easiest way to write the shell script is you see something do a lot, you do it often. It's a really good idea to make a script for it. Okay, and we can have like 5 minutes question answered right now. So let me check. Oh, I see something in the chat. Can you please post the URL for the training repository? Sure, I can open it right here. Oro Inc. trainings. And oh, okay, you have it in the Slack channel. Still, I'm gonna post it here. And the one that is default is Oro 4.1 training start. You should not try to install the application from master because there is no composer log there, and you might have some issues with the dependencies. Okay, now let's check the question and answers. Oh, there are 4 questions. Do you expect us to have platform application already installed? So yes, if you want to follow the practice or you want to just check the application, how it works, then you should have it installed. We will not go through this process during the webinar for sure. I didn't saw the type RI. Marcos, what do you mean? If you could please explain. Is there an array or collection functionality for data grids? For data grids, there can be many sources, data sources. All you have to do is to implement data source interface. Let me just find it for you. And by default, there is ORM and search data source. There is also RI one, so you can use it. We don't use it a lot in the core, but I think there is one. RI, sorry, data source interface. Yeah, there is RI data source. Also, for example, you could with API data source, right? So you will have data source that will use the API client and send some questions or sorry, some requests. So yeah, all you have to do is to implement this interface and that's it. So you can build your own data sources for the data grids. Also with Xdebug, with PHP, FPM importance not to mess ports. Oh yeah, Alexander, thank you. Yeah, you can type and get some help with this with the online. But yeah, it's important to check if everything works. Like I used to work Apache locally. Right now, I'm using the Nginx with the PHP FPM, and as you can see, Xdebug works just fine. But it's just have to be configured first. Marcus, array type hinting. The tooltips weren't showing anything related to array. So here, first of all, you need to configure PHP interpreter. And you should check the language version that you are using right here. Locally, I have 7.1, 2, and 3 installed. I do not use 7.4 at this moment because I haven't updated this training repository to the newest version. And so for this project, I use 7.3 in both places. And for example, here in the controller, I can have array hint for the return. Is there any Docker ready environment? Yeah, please ask in the Slack channel. You should get a link to the Docker stack. For me, it's really best experience to work locally and just switch the version you need. I know there is a lot of developers using Docker. I've seen it working really fine on Linux. I had always some issues when we use this on Windows. It was just a way too slow for me. And where is the Oro plugin? It's not in the marketplace in PhpStorm. Okay, Karim, I will find the link for it and post it to the community Slack right after the presentation. Okay, I think I answered all the questions. So guys, let's go with another topic. Oh, where can I find the Slack channel link? So yeah, Marcus, I have everything installed locally. What you can see right now, I work on like 6 or 7 different projects, and I just switch. And Yeah, for me it's really convenient. So what I have to do when I switch the project with different Oro versions, I need to switch the PHP. So for this, I just change the alternatives, and I have 3 PHP version installed, and just change which is being used. Right now, as you can see, we're using 7.3. And if I'm working with Elasticsearch, and most of the times I am, I just start the correct Elasticsearch version. And usually that's it. So right now it's important, guys, to understand we are working on community edition. So we're gonna talk about the differences right in the next topic. And we are not using Elasticsearch or Rabbit, so we don't need to do this. If you will be working with Enterprise Edition, of course, it's recommended to work with them because you will always use them in the production. Oh, where can I find this Slack channel link? Okay, let me just copy it to the chat. Just a moment. Yep, it's in the chat right now, so you can open it, and also it will be in the slides that we're gonna share right after the presentation. And okay, I think that's all with the questions. Let's continue with the next topic. Which is general concepts. So now we're going to talk about the concepts we have in Oro and why we created Oro in the first place. So the goal is to get familiar with the Oro applications. Some of you probably already saw a demo or play with it a lot or just a little, and how we organize the applications and what components are we using. As you all know, it is based on the Symfony framework. The current version of Oro is 4.142.2, and it uses the Symfony 4.4. We switched to the newer Symfony once it's LTS version. We never switch earlier before its long-term support. So we started with the Symfony 2.8, I think. Well, not started, but right now, Commerce 2.6 is using Symfony 2.8, and the Commerce 4.142 is using Symfony 4.4. And there should be no significant issues whenever you want to add some Symfony-specific component. So if there is a bundle that works with Symfony and you want to use it with Oro, it should go smoothly. So you just include it, require it with the component, with the composer, and it should work just fine. We use Doctrine ORM. It's awesome, but you also should pay attention to the performance. If you use it for importing like initial data, there can be a lot of objects and sometimes it can get slow. So it's important to understand about the hydration and about having huge objects. Most of the best practices of Symfony we respect and we use. Some of them we converted to our own ones. So for example, bundles YAM and routing YAM, we do not use the default that Symfony recommends. We have our own versions of this, which are very similar, just for example, with auto-loading. And OroCRM and OroCommerce are listed as Symfony projects. So here you can read about it and check what components are being used. As you can see, there's plenty of them. And the same go with the OroCommerce. Okay. So, Oro applications. First of all, we had Oro platform. You can also use, which is not like just application yet. It's just a package of functionalities or extensions to the Symfony. Then we have Oro CRM in both versions, the community and the enterprise. And we have Oro Commerce, which is the product that you usually install and use both in community and enterprise. We have some external products that are being built on the Oro platform, which is Akaneo Product Information Management. There is Diamante Desk, and there is, for example, Marello. All of them can be used together. We have some bridges that joins them together. We're gonna learn about them in a moment. For example, usually when we install the commerce, we also install the CRM and use them as a package. Now, as you know, Oro is having two editions, community and enterprise one. And the difference is in data volume, scalability, performance, support, and so on, but there should be no difference in functionalities. So, for example, you can have different search engine for community and enterprise edition, you can have different database, you can use different message queue. It will be difficult to scale, for example, community edition, but still the functionalities should be the same. So whatever works for enterprise, that should also work for the community edition in most of the cases. I'm sorry, I just lost the chat, so, okay. So, as you know, Symfony have a few environments. We always recommend to develop in dev environments. I've seen developers working in prod environment because it's faster, especially when they were using, for example, Docker. But still, it's not good experience. You will not have written changes. You may have some cache issues. It's not very good for debugging. So you always should develop in dev environment. And then you have great help of the Symfony toolbar and some Oro extensions. Here you can see the Symfony toolbar. You can check the queries that were executed. You can always open it in the new tab and check the queries. For example, when you add new bundle, you're gonna do this. If you would like to follow the practice, you're gonna do this today at the end of the day. You can check what bundles were loaded, for example. So first of all, if your functionality is not loading, it's good to check if the bundle here is listed. And if you go to the front store of application, there is also a new tab, for example, for Oro layouts. Oro layout is our templating system. It's different from the Symfony default templating. And we created special plugin for the Symfony profiler to help you with debugging this or using. So you should always go with the dev environment. Then you should use prod for demo or for checking the performance, for example. So it's always good habit to present your demo on the prod environment. So once you finish the development, switch to prod environment, clear the cache, and check if the application runs properly. And there is also a test environment, which we are using for the functional testing, and it has no demo data. So our idea for the functional test is that the demo data should be loaded at the beginning of the test, then the test should be performed, and the database should be restored to the previous version. So we do not load demo data for the test environment. So just to summarize, always use that for the development, always use prod for demonstrating something to the clients. You can also demonstrate on staging server, you can demonstrate locally, but it's good habit to demonstrate in prod because it will be just faster. So your client will see the application, how it should work, not without the caching and everything enabled. And check the features in prod mode before you merge. This is always good. For example, it works in dev mode, but there may be some caching issues or it just won't work in prod because you haven't checked something. So once you finish the development or some part of the development, check in the prod and then create a pull request. If you mess a lot, especially with the migrations and you done some changes to database, sometimes it's easier to just do the clean install of application or just reinstall it with the database dump that you had, then fixing what you've done, reverting the changes, for example. So I always recommend before you do any migration or after you install some application, just to create database backup. And then when something goes wrong, you can restore from the backup, clear the cache, and continue working. Otherwise, if you need to reinstall the application from the scratch or try to fix your mistakes, sometimes it can take a lot of time. Also, in production, JS and assets are minified, so it will be difficult to debug them, but thanks to this, they are much, much slower, few times actually. So it has to be like this, of course. Now let's talk about the structure. So the structure of the application is almost hard copy of the Symfony. So if you open it, actually let's close everything already. We have the config, when we have parameters yum config routing security, and we have the sources. This by default it will be empty. This is or no directories here, and this is where you will put your customization. For example, we have the public and templates. We are not using this at the moment, and I will explain today why. We have translation, we have var and vendor. For example, customization in public, we have the tracking PHP, which is just alias to this class, and this is used for the marketing campaigns to track if the campaign progress. But as you can see, if you work with Symfony, you should really feel familiar with Oro, because it looks exactly the same and the directory structure is the same. For customizations, you can put them in SRC, and this is what you are going to do in the practices. So in SRC, I can create a training bundle, and there will be a few bundles or one bundle. It depends on your company logic for this. Or the other way is to install some customization via Composer. There can be some extensions, there can be some new bundles or just tweaks. You can just require them with the Composer, and that will be installed in vendors. Now, the application uses packages. We do not use the bundles as is in Oro, we use the packages. And package contains the finished functionality, and application require one or more packages. Usually, of course, it's more. Also, packages can depend on each other, require each other, and we use Composer to work with the packages. So it's exactly like we would work with the bundles, but packages like the one layer above it, and can contain many bundles to serve specific functionality. For example, this is how the packages are structured in Oro for the main packages. So we have the platform. On top of this, we have Platform Enterprise, which uses the platform and adds some additional functionalities, or not functionalities, but for example, adapters to Elasticsearch. And then we have two products, CRM and the Commerce. Both of those have the enterprise versions, and as you can see, the CRM and Commerce is based on platform, while CRM Enterprise and Commerce Enterprise is based on Platform Enterprise. And also we have the product that you actually have in training repository, which is Commerce CRM, and there is Commerce CRM Enterprise just on top of it. Okay, so if you think about this, there will be some Composer JSONs loading it actually. You're gonna see it in a second. So whenever I need additional packages, I can install some plugins. I can enable some integrations. So we're gonna talk about the integrations in the next week. But for example, if I would like to enable some integration that I already have, I can go to the System Manage Integrations, create integration, pick one of those that are already here, or create a new one, or just install the new one if there is an integration ready for use. And it's already customizing the application a little bit. So you can create your own plugins, of course, like if you have few Oro projects and functionalities are shared, you can do them by copying the directory, which is not always the best, because if you find the issue with it, you find some error you need to fix, you will fix it in one project and then need to copy this to all the projects when you use this plugin, let's go. But you could also create your own repository with the plugin and then just require your own extension with the Composer. And once you fix some bug in this repository, you just update your package in other projects, and you don't have to copy the code manually. And also we have Marketplace. So In the marketplace, there is a plenty of extensions. There is a few extensions for the payment bundles. There is new extensions for the default theme configuration when you can play with the theme colors being used. And there is also, for example, Google Tag Manager integration, support for YouTube. There is plenty of those, and you can check. There is a link in the slides. And so most of those links are actually here for you. I will click some of them and follow some of them, but not everything that is in the link. So mostly for you, so once you get the slides and you would like to check something, you will have the links to help you. So for example, for CRM application, we have dependency to the CRM. The CRM itself have dependency to platform and few additional packages. And let's check how it will be structured in the composer. So here I have CRM application, and there is a composer for it. And as you can see, I do not require some bundles itself, but those are the packages. So I require the specific PHP version, I require a specific OroCRM version, and additional fields like serialized fields, Hangouts, and Magento or .mailer. So it's CRM and those additional fields. Then CRM itself will have additional dependencies. So it works similar, very, very similar to the bundles itself. And those are the additional, sorry, actually this is wrong link. Those are the additional dependencies for the CRM. As you can see, it depends on Oro platform, so it requires Oro platform, and Oro platform have its own dependencies, and actually there is quite a lot of them. Okay, so this is how it structures. It works exactly like with the bundles, but we work with the packages which serve the final functionality. For example, if we have something like customer portal, let's check it. It will have few bundles that are together whenever you install customer portal for just customer bundle, but also some additional menus, stylebook, website, and also there can be bridges. We're going to talk about them in a second to integrate this customer portal with other packages, for example, like with CRM. So bundle contain finished code. So we finish some functionality and we pack it in the bundle. Then package contains few or more bundles. I showed the example for the CRM customer portal. The same goes with the marketing. Marketing can have some marketing lists, but that's not all of it. So whenever I install the package, I will have few bundles. So I have campaigns, I have marketing lists, and I have some trackings for those campaigns in the list. And we do not use package manager for bundles. So we should not require the specific bundle. We should never require just marketing activity bundle. We should require the marketing package to get this as a dependency. So what is the bundle directory structure? Whenever you customize, for sure, you will create some bundles and you will add your own functionalities, or you will extend or override Oro functionalities. So to start, in SRC directory, you should create your namespace. Here it's training, it can be your company name. You should not use Oro, because then if Oro will have the same namespaces, you may have some conflicts. For example, right now there is no such bundle in Oro. You will create it as customization, then Oro will add this functionality with, by coincidence, the same namespacing, and you will have conflicts whenever you upgrade. So this should be your namespace for the customization, name of the project, for example. So here I have training, bundle, and here I create the bundles. To register a bundle, I don't need to add it to the kernel like we go with the Symfony. We have our own functionality for this. So first of all, I need the bundle file. We just extend the bundle. And the second thing I need is create resources, config, Oro directory, and just add the bundles YAML, where I register the bundle with some specific priority. So bundles will be registered using this bundle yam, which is auto-discovered, so I don't need to add it anywhere. And it will be loaded with this priority. So if I need to override service, I should make sure that this bundle is loaded after the one where the service I need to override. So usually when you customize the application, you go with the high priorities, unless you need to override something before the other Oro bundle is loaded. Then you can check the priority of the first bundle, priority of the second one, and just choose the one between those two values for your custom bundle. So actually, once you created this structure, so just the bundle file and the bundle yam, you should remove the cache, refresh the application, and in the profiler, you should see your bundle. So actually, let's do this. I will just close some tabs, and I open the profiler. And for example, here on configuration, I can see my bundle. So if you start customizing and it doesn't work, or it looks like it's not even being called, make sure that you check if your bundle is here. Otherwise, it won't work because Symfony didn't register, didn't use your bundle. Okay, so this is it actually. That's to create a very simple bundle. It's only those files. Of course, later on you will create services, dependency injection, and here the extension to load the services. But at the very beginning, all you need is to create the bundle, create the file for it, and the bundle's YAML. After this, you should check if it works, if this is registered, and then continue with your customizations. This is good habit. So you check if this is loaded right after you create it, and then continue. Let me close the tabs. Okay, so what else can go there? Of course, the migrations. We're gonna talk about the migrations tomorrow. We recommend creating some documentation. As you will see, most of the Oro bundles are pretty well documented, and they are documented inside the bundles, but also in the documentation portal, which is linked here at the end of the topic. And of course more. So it's up to you how you divide the directories. It can be logical, so like all even listeners in one place, or it can be per functionality. So in given bundle, you have related items and some other functionalities, and you can create the directory where you put everything related to related items, like all the listeners there. So it's up to you, but it's good that all of your developers will use the same approach. Now, we have bundles that you've already seen, but also we have some components and the bridges. So what are the difference? So component is something that is abstract. It's just a library, and it never have or should never have bundle dependencies. An example should be the message queue. Okay, you see I have the component message queue, and this is some abstract. So this is the message queue not being implemented yet. It's not working message queue. It's just the abstract that you can actually use in every project. You can just copy it and use it in your own project. It will not have dependency to other Oro bundles. So we create a component. As you can see, there is quite few of them. And then we also have message queue bundle, which uses the, actually this is just a migration. We have message queue bundle here, which uses the component itself. So we have the abstract component, and then we have the bundle, which implements functionalities for this component in Oro approach. And also we have the bridges. So for example, we installed the CRM, we installed the commerce. And in CRM, we have the entity called account, which is the highest entity in the structure. And in commerce, we have the customer, okay? So we installed those two separately, but the customer should be connected to account, right? There should be like some bind. And for this, we have the bridge. So you already see it actually. It was in this customer portal. And there is a bridge which connects accounts to the customers. Okay, so whenever I need to join the bundles that are not aware of each other or belong to different packages, I should create a bridge, and this bridge should have the logic of joining those entities together. Then, as you can see, Oro works with a few databases here. Because we use Community Edition, we work with MySQL. On Enterprise Edition, we always go with the PostgreSQL. Those might not be true at this moment. This was the ideas why we chose PostgreSQL a few years ago when we were creating the Oro platform. So for MySQL, there was no support for the strict SQL, and it was suitable for the small application, like 1 million entities. We designed Oro with the idea of way more than million of entities, so it was not good enough. So we went with Postgres, and the Enterprise Edition always works with the Postgres. We never use the MySQL for the enterprise application or production. And is used strict SQL. It's better for the big applications, so it's just way faster. Even recently I compared, I know that MySQL improved a lot, but still with the same database, the application was going faster with PostgreSQL. Then we have the search engines. And for Community Edition, we have ORM search engine. For Enterprise, we always use Elasticsearch. Of course, Elasticsearch will be faster, but actually ORM we sometimes use even for the enterprises locally because it's way better for debugging. So actually, here let's go with the database. And we have something like Oro Search. As you can see, there is a few tables. There is an item, and for this item, there will be a few additional tables. So it uses entity attribute value. So for the item, we have the identifier for a specific item. So the entity and its ID, right? With those two values, I can find the specific item in the database. So this is a fully qualified class name. We also have some aliases for those entities. We're gonna talk about the aliases later on. And we have the ID. So I know which specific, I can find the entity that it relates to. And then depending on the field type, I have different tables. So I have different table for text, different for integer, decimals, or the dates. Thanks to this, for example, if I need to use full text search, I will only use it for the index text. I will not use it for all the tables. So I know which fields should be used with different approaches. And of course, it's not as performant as Elasticsearch, but for the small application, it really is quite fine. On the other hand, on the production of the enterprise, we always go with the Elasticsearch. Sometimes we have like huge indexes with the 10 million SKUs, and with ORM, it will be just too slow. And also with Elasticsearch, you can use synonyms, you can use some different kind of tokenizers, so you can really configure up to your specific needs. For example, you can have weights for specific attributes, like this attribute should have be much more important than the description. And you have a lot of configuration that you can use. And it is just way faster. We have few questions about different search engines. Right now, the one we support is just Elasticsearch. We don't use like Solr or different ones. Elasticsearch is the one we use on the production, and we are really, really happy with it. It was improved quite a lot in the recent version. And here's the admin guide. If you will have any questions how to install or how to configure it, you should start looking for the answers. But still, locally, it's sometimes good to switch to ORM. Actually, you can configure it in the parameters YAML. Okay, you will not see it here because it is a community edition. Let me open some other project. Okay, so this is the configuration for the enterprise, and here you have search engine. So you can see that it's configured for the Elasticsearch. I have some host, I have port, and I have some indexes. It's different for the backend and different for the front end of the application. And the same goes, for example, message queue. We're gonna talk in a second. So here you can see I configured the RabbitMQ by default, and in Community Edition only, you can only use the dbol implementation for this. So yeah, next thing is the message queue engines. We have our own implementation of something that emulates the queue. We call it dbol. And it is really enough for small application, and it is really good for debugging. So if you work with the message queue and you have some issues, you can install the application locally, change the message queue engine to dbol, and thanks to this, I know that you can check the messages also on Rabbit, but then you will need to resend it to the Rabbit, and it's not that simple to take a look at them. While if you use dbol, you will have them in the database. So it's Oro message queue, and actually those three tables that you are interested in. The message queue, so this is where the messages are stored before they are consumed, and this is where you put jobs and some unique jobs if you have them. We're gonna talk about the message queue in the next week, and this is really important part of Oro because there is a huge part of Oro being done asynchronous. Actually, everything we can do asynchronous, we do this. So if you have it on Rabbit, of course, it's faster, it's easier to scale, but it's a little bit more difficult to debug. So locally, you can debug them with the dbol. And on production, we always go with the Rabbit. We use different exchanges, for example, different consumers for search and different for some other messages like data audit or import export, so they will not conflict each other. For example, if somebody exports some huge amount of data, other users will not have to wait for the search results or something, for some different messages to be processed. And now, how can you configure Oro? As you already seen, there are some YAMLs, but also, so you can configure them the Symfony way, but also, like, instead of using the config parameters YAML, you can have configure them with Oro way. So the default files in Symfony you've already seen. Let me close this. And here in config, you have the parameters, you have the routing, you have the security, and you have the config. So this is where you configure them the Symfony way. So you have some other bundles, and here you can configure them. Sure. This will work just fine, the same way as it works always with Symfony. Also, you can, for example, go with the app YAML. So in any bundle in Oro that is registered with bundles YAML, you can create resources config Oro directory, and there is app YAML. And here you can configure the same way as you do this in config YAML. It has less priority than config YAML, so whenever you configure in specific bundle, you can think about this as default values. So you install some bundle, there will be some values configured in app YAML. If you copy them to config YAML and change, you will just override them. So for example, you have some bundles that send a newsletter for user, for example, and in app.yam, in this bundle, you can configure interval or any other thing you want to configure. So whenever you install this bundle or send it to some, add it to some other project, you will have some initial configuration. Then you can change it in main config YAML, for example. I mentioned that we do not use the default approach to routing YAML, so we do not add routing YAML in the resources config here next to the services like we would do with the Symfony. Instead, we add them to Oro directory with routing YAML. It is the same structure, as you can see, but it is being auto-loaded. So you don't need to load them separately. You just create the file and it will be auto-loaded for you. Now here are links for some additional functionalities we have. and two of them I like pretty much. So first of all, how to use the maintenance mode. We use the lexic extension for this, but we also have the service to check if the maintenance is on and off, or also to switch it from on and off. Of course, usually you will do this from the console during the upgrade of application or new deploy. But there is also a way to do this in the application itself. Whenever we enable the maintenance mode, we disable all the cron jobs. And about the cron, we're gonna talk in a moment. The second thing I really like, this is actually about the app-yams we talked a second ago, but is the optional listeners. So for example, we have a listener that stores the changes for the entity. So for example, we do something with entity, we persist it or just update, we store the data audit information. It is awesome. We should have it enabled most of the time. But for example, we do some initial data import and we want to import a few thousand of entities from the CSV file. We don't need to track changes to those files because this is just initial import. So your listener can implement the disable optional listener interface. Let's find it in IDE. Sorry. And this interface just have one method. It's enabled, set enabled, or can be true or false. Just take the boolean. And if your interface listeners implements this interface, then whenever you run some commands, for example, from the command line, you can specify disable listeners, and here it will be your listener name. And it will mean that this listener will be disabled at the runtime of this command. So I can import the application or I can do some other stuff with the command. And my listener, I don't need to like comment or add some conditions. I just need to have this interface implemented and check how it works. Also, as you will see, there is a lot of comments in Oro. So I can look for some comments, for example, just bin console and grab for something. And here I will have the list with this word and some description. So like this one, I can list the listeners that implement this interface, for example. And if you just run it this way, you will have the whole list of the comments we have registered. And you can see there is a lot of them. Of course, you don't need to know all of them, but few of them are really, really handy to use. But so we've seen how we can configure the application in files, but it's not super easy because whenever you want to configure with files, you will need to change the files, make some pull requests, and then probably deploy the application. So you can also configure pretty lot of things through the UI. So you already seen going to the system, and there is a configuration. There is quite a lot of configuration, and it's really super useful to use this quick search. So I can type routing, and it will find any tab or even any description or tooltip that will have this field, and I can change it. So we can see I can change the URL of the application. For the products, I can change how they behave for the configurable products. This you're gonna learn on the commerce trainings next week or week after. And we're not going to check all the configurations here. You can take a time, install the application and play with it yourself. But also it's very important that you understand there are a few scopes. So what you see right now, we call global configuration. Okay, so in the community edition, this is top level configuration. And in enterprise, there will be also like organization scope, which is additional. But in community, we also have the scope for the users. So for example, I can configure something globally, but there for each user, I can configure some specific fields for example, this user can have different localizations. So whenever John Doe login in the system, he will have different localization. He can use different time zone, for example, or different units, or, for example, have email configuration with the synchronization to his own account. It's very simple to add something. So here you can see that we have global and user. In enterprise, we would also have websites scope and organization, which you cannot see here. But whenever you would like to check how it works, you can go to demo site, which is demo.orocommerce.com. Important part about it is this notice here. It's being cleaned every 30 minutes. So you can add some entities, you can do a lot of changes here, but every 30 minutes it will be gone. So here I can go to the management console and explore as administrator. So see, I have a drop down with specific organizations here, and also I will have the organization tab here, which I will not have here. Actually, I will, but it will be just one. And I don't have like the index page. And if I click here, there will be index. And here I can configure for specific organization. As you can see, it's way more options than for the user. And here I will also have the websites, comparing to the training where it's none, because it's community. And I can have different configuration for each website scope. Okay, so those are just additional scopes of the configuration. Yes. Also, demo sometimes is really good if to check if some functionality you just broke and how it works by default. For example, you did some customization, you have some additional fields, but something doesn't work. You can log here to the demo and compare how it works with the clean installation. It can also happen that actually this is a core bug, then please do report it or create a PR with fix. It's always good to work as a community and do some contributions. So we always try to follow and focus actually on following the best practices and principles. So like Solid, and everybody is aware about and follows the grasp. For me also the very important is to follow the keys. It should really be simple. The code should be easy to read. And for don't repeat yourself, we have some checks on the Jenkins. So if you copy someone's code, it will fail on Jenkins and you will have to fix your pull request. Of course, sometimes there is a need to copy something because you cannot extend or you cannot make an abstraction, but usually there are better solutions. And the one I really strongly recommend, especially when you work for some project for the partner, for the client, is Yagni. You ain't gonna need it. So whenever you develop some functionality, of course, it's a good idea to think about it, propose some solution to the client, discuss if there is a better way, and also think about what can be extended later on. For example, you export something to CSV, sure, you should think that maybe later on they will want to export this to the Excel file or even to the PDF. So you should make your solution extendable. You should add some extension point. So you design the architecture with those additional functionalities in mind, but of course you do not develop them because first of all, you will add some additional complexity you don't need at this moment, and you will spend the time, and still this is just a possibility. Maybe your client won't need it. So really think what else you can do with the application and add the possibilities to extend it this way. But if you don't need it, don't do it at this specific moment. And I've seen in the chat that some of you already installed the application. Some of you probably will just install this today after the webinar or tomorrow. So right now we can only install application from the CLI. In 2.6, we have the application installed from UI, and there was more issues with it than help. So most of the developers still prefer to install them in the CLI. So supporting the UI didn't make that much sense. So to install, you just need to type bin console oro install. Then the whole application will be installed, the database structure will be created, the fixtures will be loaded, and you will have some requests. So usually with the local environment, it takes like 5 minutes. I know with the Docker, it can take a little bit more. So it's good that you actually can provide the switches for your installation and then go grab a coffee. So for example, to install the training application, I can use the command like this. So you can see it's console install, but then I have dropped database because I was reinstalling the application, and I can provide username, user email, password, and some information if I should load the sample data, for example, and which environment to use. Thanks to this, I will not be prompt about them during the installation, and I can run the installation and go grab a coffee or just stretch your legs for a second. So it's useful, and otherwise you will have to wait, answer the prompt questions, and then wait again. It's not very, very good. We use the installation a lot in the continuous integrations. We have few scenarios covered. For example, upgrading the application. So the CI installed the application in the previous version on your branch and then does the upgrade, installing from scratch and check from different environments, for example. And here are the docs, and you can check how to install every possible type of the installations of the applications you have. So OroCommerce for community and the enterprise, for CRM is the same. So you just click and you can follow step by step how to install. But in the scratch, it's just bin console Oro install. If you would like to reinstall the application, actually I can try this right now. So I have the application installed, and if I run, it will fail, and it will tell me what I have to do to reinstall the application. First of all, I need to change the parameter installed false. And actually in the chat, I saw that some of you installed the application in Docker and it was still saying not installed. Please go and check if you have this parameter set to date. So once the application is properly installed, I can go to the config parameter yum, and installed should have some date time. Please check if this is, if you installed the application, maybe it failed at the very end and it was still saying here false or null. Please change it to the date and try to refresh your application. So if I would like to reinstall now, I will have to change this to false. Then, as you can see, I will have to remove the var cache folder manually. So just rmrf in Linux, and either drop database or use this -- drop database option. Okay, you can see that actually always with -h, I have some help. And if your environment is a little bit slow, it's good to say timeout and set it to 0, so you will not have the timeout during the installation process. And also you have those things that you can ask to their install command to not be prompt about. Important one, okay, it's in a second. So usually you install application once, maybe then you reinstall during development, but once the application is live, once it's on production or even on staging server, you will follow with the upgrade. So if you have Enterprise Edition hosted on the Oro Cloud, there is a simple command, just upgrade, and it will perform the steps for you. But if you want to do this manually, of course, it's possible. So first of all, you should turn the maintenance mode. Turn off the application process like the message queue, like you should kill the consumers, stop or just stop them, and disable the cron. Then you should manually create the backups of your database and the source code. Pull your changes, so like switch to the new release stack or whatever way you use. Install, run the composer install. Remove the cache. Execute, and this is like pretty command that you're gonna use a lot. So Oro platform update. It's nice because it executes all the migrations, reinstall the assets, and does a lot of things for you. So for example, even with working with this training repository, if you're gonna switch from one branch to another one, and you are not sure if there were migration, if the assets were changed, so instead of running migration command manually and asset install manually, you just run platform update, and all those will be done for you. So it's a just better way to do this. And here there are two important flags, especially on production. If you have big index, like a lot of products, and you just did a tiny change, even like new field, there is no point to reindex whole index again. So you can add the switch skip search reindexation, and thanks to this, there will be no need for indexation, or you can schedule it. So it will not be reindexed during the upgrade of the application. It will be scheduled and done with the message queue after the application is back up and running again. So those are important things. Also, if you run this command by mistake, and he will tell you that it will not be executed without the force flag. Okay, so just for some protection. Once you've done this, and there will be no mistakes, you just run everything back. So you just run your cron and message queue again, disable message queue, disable maintenance mode, and start. There's a doc with all the comments you can do step by step to do this manually on yourself, by yourself. So we already said that cron have to be disabled, and I don't know, but in my experience, whenever we work with PHP application, there is always some cron processes that you need to add to the cron tab, and they are scheduled to do some dumps or backups or exports. They can be daily or monthly. There is a lot of them, and then your cron tab looks like mess. So there is difficult to find the process. It's difficult to understand when it's executed, and there is a lot. So in Oro, we decided to simplify it, and you need to add only one line to the cron tab, which is execution of this command, bin console Oro cron. Okay. So this triggers other commands. So you can create a lot of commands. You implement cron command command interface, and then they will be executed, but you don't need to add them to the cron tab. So actually, let's see the docs for this. There are two commands. First of all is OroCRM definition loads, which dumps all the definitions from the database and then iterate through all the commands that implement this interface and load them to the database. So let's check the interface. Okay, so get the default definition and if this is active or not. It can be just true false, but you also can have some logic. Then this command is active only in specific conditions. And as you can see, there is a lot of commands implementing this interface, and I don't need to add them to cron tab. I just create a command, for example, cleanup command from the message queue, and get some cron definition, so when this should be executed, and that's it. Then I just execute OroCRM with the cron tab, which should be scheduled every minute. This command check what the definitions are loaded to database, checked when should they be executed, and if this is the correct time, it executes them. Another benefit is that I can check all the scheduled things in the UI. Just find it, it's a scheduled tasks. And here I have all the commands that are registered for OroCRM and the definition when they should be executed. Okay, so now when I want to upgrade the application and I have to do this manually, I don't need to comment a lot of lines in the cron tab. I just comment the one, and all those comments would not be executed before I uncomment this in the cron tab. Okay, so the only two requirements, it has to implement the cron command interface, and it has to be prefixed with the OroCRM commands. So for example, the one you've seen, as you can see, it's OroCRM message queue cleanup. And now, if we already seen the message queue cleanup, how the message queue works. It doesn't matter if you have the debug engine or if you use the Rabbit MQ engine. There is a consumer which is being run with the Oro message queue consume. So let's copy this one. Oh, sorry. And looks like nothing is happening because I can set some verbosity. Oh. And now I can see the logs and my message queue is being consumed. And the verbosity can be on different levels. Very verbose, as you can see, there is a lot of information. There is even the debug and just info types. If I go with the -v, I will just see the critical or more important informations. And locally, of course, if I need to test something, develop something, I can check with one consumer. On production, there will be always more. And if you develop new functionality that works on message queue, you should test it with parallel execution, okay? So you finish the functionality and then you should run few consumers and check if there are no race conditions, for example, or some other conflicts between the consumers itself. So during development, running one is fine, but before you push it to production, if this works on message queue, you should check if this works with the parallel execution. Okay, so of course, it will be not the best idea to execute them manually. So for this, we use supervisor. And there we configure how many consumers should be run. And what is most important, the supervisor restart them for us. So the consumer can fail with some critical error. It can also fail because we add some switches, and this is recommended to add them, like the message limit, time limit, or the memory limit. Even if we tried our best, there will be always a little bit memory consumption, and the consumer after some time will get slower. So it's good that it will die after some time limit or after it's used certain memory, and the supervisor will just restart it for us, okay? And locally, you should also use it a lot because, for example, if you would like to test some export or you just to test some data audit functionalities, you will have to run the message queue because otherwise you will not see the changes as they are done with the consumers. Next is about logger. Because Oro is a huge application, you will need to log a lot. So you add some functionality and you think, yeah, it will never fail. Of course, you cannot do such assumptions, and you should log everywhere, especially in the critical places, like in the integrations, and you should think about correct logging level. So in the very end of the stack trace, you should add verbose logs, of course, without any credentials. And always the message should be short and the context should be rich, okay? So we just have short message what failed, and then in the context, we should add additional information about the exception. So we can cache them on few levels. For example, here we can cache them and be very verbose loggings, but we can also cache the execution of this method and log something less verbose, for example, with the critical level, for example. Okay, so if you do extensive logging, actually you will do yourself a favor, and whenever something fails, it will be way easier to debug it. We all know that looking for errors in production is not something nice. It's something we really would like to avoid, but it happens. And when it happens, if you have logs, you should be safe to fix it pretty quickly. And last but really important thing, how to find required code. Because of the size of the Oro code base, it is not very simple. But if you use IDE correctly, it will help you a lot. For example, you can search by labels, but this is just 2 more clicks than usual. So let's close those windows. And for example, let's go to the lead view page, for example. and I would like to find this. So I can find for delete information. Sorry. So I can Control-Shift-F, I will look for some text. And I know it should be in messages YAM. Actually here I found it only in messages YAM, but I can narrow this down. And here I have the messages YAM. It tells me nothing because all I found is a translation string. But if I just copy it with the translation string and search again, not in the YAML files anymore, I will, actually, okay, so this is not the best example, but here, after the moment it loads, I will find the template what it was used, okay? So I found the label, I will check the translation string, and then I will check where it was used, and I can find that this was here, or actually this was the second one, which is the view template of the lead. Okay, so looking for string is still possible. You just need to think that first you will find the translation and then look for the translation string itself. Of course, you can look for the HTML tags or classes. So for example, I can inspect this and look for something specific. And for example, for the component, usually the components, it's easier to find than the specific HTML class. And of course, use the profiler. This is helped a lot. For example, the simple to check what controller, what root or what controller is being loaded. I can open this controller. So it's a lead controller. And it was a view action. And here I can click the template and I am in the template, okay? So if your IDE is configured properly and it's indexed, it is really not that difficult to find the thing you are looking for. I can set the breakpoints, of course, if I have Xdebug enabled, and also I can use regex. So here, Control F, I can look and I can use regex and look for something very specific. For example, that something is at the end of the line or in specific format. So really, really play with your IDE, and after a while with some experience, it's really quite easy to find what you are looking for. So to summarize, some best practices. Make sure your application can be installed from scratch. So we have some application, it's working, and now we work on new features. We implement it, and we just run, usually we just run the migrations because, yeah, we already have the application, we have the dump from the staging, we just migrate it, okay? But still, you should think that somebody may just install it from the scratch. So be sure that it also works when the Oro install command is executed. Then you should make your local environment as close to prod as possible. So on the production, you will use Redis, you will use Elasticsearch, Rabbit, and Postgres. You should use all of those locally. If you need to debug, for example, message queue, you can switch to debug, do some debugging. If you find the bug, you can fix it, switch back to Rabbit and check if this is fixed also for Rabbit. But most of the time, it should be as close as your production as possible. Always use dev for development, and once it's ready, you switch to prod and check if it works. This is kind of obvious, but still happens. You never use product servers for development purpose. You do not do any tests on production or sort of like this, because mistakes can happen. If you're planning to do the same code in multiple projects, it's what I said, you can copy the directory, like the bundle, but also you can create like own repository for it and then install in your project with the Composer JSON. Thanks to this, if you have to introduce some changes to this, introduce some changes to this bundle or fix some bugs, you just put the changes, run Composer update on your projects, and that's it. You should always define what is the purpose of the bundle. So you create a bundle, create a README file, and just add some information why this bundle exists, okay? You don't need to explain everything. You don't have to describe every class or every functionality there, but at least let the other users or let your other teammates to understand why you created this bundle. If your bundle overrides some existing bundle from Oro, for example, like extend user entity, it's good to call them with your company or project namespace and then user bundle, so we know to which bundle it relates to. Then you should write the documentation. It doesn't have to be very robust. It should depend on who will be working with your code. And those are senior experienced developers. It may only mention something that is not usual or something that's not obvious. If this is like for the big teams with juniors, it's good to also document responsibility at what are the relation to other bundles, like the structure and stuff. But still, you should not spend like too much time with it. Okay, and when to find documentation? First of all, the one I really like is the documentation in bundles. So if you know that you are looking for something about the migrations or extended relations, it will be Oro platform. And it's on the first place, for example. So it's good to add this Oro platform prefix or Oro commerce, Oro CRM, and it's quite good documentation inside the bundles. Also, we try to gather, and this is actually an ongoing process, all the documentation in doc Oro Inc. Address. There are some slides on the SlideShare, also on YouTube, and always you can use Google. There is a lot of information on the Stack Overflow, and also it's very good, this Slack community channel. The community is quite active, and if you want to get the response from the community, Andrew probably will help you in quite fast, actually. Okay, guys, let's do like really short Q&A, like 5 minutes, I think, and then let's do this 15-minute break. We will have very short theory about testing, and then finally we see how we can start customizing our application. Okay, so let's check the Q&As. Yep, there are only 3 questions. Is there a pre-installed environment in CentOS? Osama, sorry, I don't know how to read. Please ask this question in this community Slack. I know that some of our environment are running on CentOS. Maybe they will be able to provide you some links. The training application works well using domain index, but with domain index def, the images are missing. I run bin console Oro asset install symlink and def and Oro assets watch. Please check, Vinay, please check if you run the consumers, because maybe some of those messages were not processed and some of the assets were not, some of the images were not converted to the correct format. And yeah, this would be my first guess. Can you post complete command line for bin console Oro install? And so it was there actually here, so you can run Oro install -h, and you just use those for yourself. Okay, so you provide username, email. So in my comment, those are my email, my username. It was dummy password, and this is the important one, to load demo data or not. If you work with some dump from staging, of course you won't load it, but for the purposes of like this training or for demonstration for client, the demo data are really good to have. The 1 million entities in MySQL technical limit. No, this, as I said, this was the reason when we were choosing the correct engine, the correct database a few years ago. Right now, the MySQL improved a lot. This is not like the limit. It was only about usability and the performance of the application. Right now, you should be able to work with way bigger MySQL databases. Oro platform must be installed in the same directory as Oro commerce. So both of those are just the dependencies. So you install them in vendors. When you install Oro commerce, it comes with Oro platform installed already. So you cannot install Oro commerce without the Oro platform. but you can install Oro platform without Oro Commerce. Okay, so Commerce is built on the platform, not other way around. So you can install Oro platform itself, but Oro Commerce will always come with Oro platform. Is the recommended version of MySQL in AWS? Please post this question to the Slack. And I think for sure it works with 5.7. I'm not sure what is the newest one it works with. I usually work with the Postgres. Okay, guys, let's do the 15 minutes break and we start 20 past 6. Actually, it's my time in 15 minutes. Thank you. Okay, guys, I think we can continue. So right now we'll talk a really briefly about the testing, how do we approach it, and how we recommend you go with it. And then we're gonna start talking how we can customize the application. For this will be the first practice. We will see if we will start it today or I will just show it tomorrow. It depends on the timing. So as you know, we should make this no longer than 3 hours, and I think usually it will be between 2.5 hours, top 3 hours a day. So about the testing, probably whenever you went to the job interview, there is always the same question: why do we need tests? Okay, so it's always the same. We always know the answers, but then on the application, whenever we start development, sometimes there is no time, sometimes there is no budget, and sometimes, of course, we can go with the full test coverage, and this is awesome, but also it takes a lot of time and slows down the development. Okay, so why do we need tests? First of all, reliability. So we create some functionality, then we change in some other places, or we just extend it. And of course, we do some manual checks if everything works correctly. But we cannot check everything, especially if this is our functionality. It's easy to always just go the positive scenarios and forget about some negative scenarios, about some edge cases. Also, it's better code quality. If the code is very difficult to test, probably there is something wrong about the code. There is some a lot to coupling between objects. There is like wrong type hinting, like strict type hinting, no interfaces, and it's just difficult. Then we should cover business use cases, and this is the one I really recommend to start with. And we use it a lot with continuous integration, right? So when we have tests, the continuous integration can execute them for us. We don't have to run them manually all the time. And for example, say this pull request, this merge request cannot be merged before the tests are failing. And then, of course, sometimes it can fail because the functionality was changed, but you know that something is wrong, and either you fix the test or you fix the functionality. So it's just really convenient for you to have them. Okay, so what types of tests do you have in Oro? We have unit tests, of course, which are the fastest test, the simplest one. We have some functional tests, and we have a lot of Behat tests. And this is the one I recommend you if you only can do one type of tests. And it's great to, for example, if you implement some functionality, some new functionality, you always will have some acceptance criteria. And this is actually ready scenarios for you. You just convert those acceptance criteria to the Behat scenarios. You write the specific steps, and as this is something that is needed for this functionality to be accepted, it should be tested. Okay, so we start from the unit tests. They test just the separate classes. They do not test bigger functionalities. They cannot have interaction with the storages, so they will not prompt the query the database or the search index. They can use mocks if they need to rely on other objects. They should run without application being installed. So you just get the repository and you should be able to run the unit tests. And they validate the behavior on the class level. So just specific classes on specific methods functionalities, not the bigger logic. And they are super fast. Okay, so you've already seen when I executed some unit tests. So I can go to the any Oro bundle. Sorry about this. and here is always a tests. And usually there will be Behat functional units. Sometimes there are JS tests. We're not going to cover them right now. And I can execute all of them, and that's it. I don't need to have application installed. I don't need specific environment, nothing. It just validates the class logic. Okay, then we have the functional test, and for this we need to install the application in the test environment, and this actually can be in parallel. So we can develop and prod environment for our development and the demonstration, and we can have the test environments right next to it with different, for example, configuration, and run the tests on it. So here we have the parameters test YAML, and we can connect to different database, for example, and then execute the test on it. Always I have the same recommendation. Whenever you install environment in prod for the Behat or in test environment for the functional test, create a backup of this database. Because whenever your test will fail, for example, some data in your database will be corrupted or just not cleared properly, following tests can fail because there will be some data residues in your database. And instead of reinstalling whole application from the scratch, you just restore the database from the backup and you can run the tests again. So always remember for test purposes, actually for development too, it's good to have those database backups. For development, they usually are not needed whenever you are not using migrations, but for the test, even if a test fails on something else, their database will not be cleared properly and the following test will fail. Okay, so the functional tests can have some interaction with the storages. They should not use mocks or use as minimum as possible, sorry. And you have to install in the test mode, and remember that we do not load the fixtures or we do not load demo data in the test mode. All the fixtures needed for the test will be loaded by the test itself. And then you validate the behavior on the bundle, so just logic. They are slower than unit, way slower. Usually they are seconds, not just milliseconds. And we put them in the test functional. So we can validate some controller, some API and other requests with the functional test. And the Behat test, and I've really recommended if you cannot spend a lot of time on testing, you should at least start from them because they are quite easy to write right now because you will have a lot of steps defined for them and they test the real application. So if something happens in the normal user scenarios, you will know because thanks to the Behat test. So they test the whole application. You just have the scenario, so user register, user login, user change password, user logout, and login with new password, okay? So this is the scenario, and the application, the test will test whole scenario and will let you know if something fails with it. So they cover the real business use cases. So as I said, you should get the acceptance criteria for specific functionalities and just convert them to the Behat scenarios. We always execute Behats in the prod mode. And my recommendation, and this is actually from all of us in here, you should create a separate installation for this, okay? So you can develop on one application, and when this is ready, you just switch to this other vhost, other application, pull the changes, upgrade the application, and run the Behats for you, okay? Because there should be no data, the same as with the functional test, and everything should be loaded by the test fixtures and then should be cleaned. So actually, I will demonstrate you how it works. So I have the separate project for this, which is called Training Behats. And this is exactly the same repository, just different vhost, and it's using different database. So for example, let's close other tabs. This is how the Behat scenario could look like. First of all, as you can see, there is no code. I have clear steps and I can read it not being a developer. So I can see what this test is checking just by reading it. I don't need to be very specific or know a lot about those. And I can always go to the definitions and check what this given step does. And also, I should be able to, yeah, sorry, I just need to change the directory settings. And in a second, I will show it to you. Okay, I will need to check my cache for this. But nevertheless, so I would like to run this customer login feature. So first of all, I will need to run the Chrome driver. There is a pretty good guide. If you type Oro platform Behat guide, you will have a guide how to start with Behats, how to write them, and how to execute them. It's really helpful. But first of all, I will go to the console and I will write the Chrome driver. Let me just find the command. Okay, so I have the driver running, and now I will just get the feature to be tested. I can execute them also from the IDE, but here it will be easier to show you. Okay, so it's running. As you can see, it is dumping the application state with database including, and then it will oh yeah, I started modifying it and just left something. I will take this, and you should see the test running here. Okay, so it is loading the fixtures, and now it also opens the browser. Let me move it here for you. So it will be executing the tests. Okay, so it will actually run the application with the separate URL I have for it. And step by step, it will go and fill the inputs, click the buttons, and check how everything works. So if something doesn't work here, it means it will not work for the user either. Also, it can have many windows, for example, one for the backend and other one for the frontend. So we can work with sessions. So you see it opened the second window, and right now it's executing the stuff as a different logged in user because the scenario was like this. I will show it. Actually, this was defined at the very beginning of the scenario. Okay, so the test was done. As you can see, it was also processing the message queue at the same time. Right now, it cleans the state of the application after the test. So it stopped the message queue, cleaned the message queue, restored the database, and it will be ready for the next scenarios with the database cleaned up. So if something would fail, for example, it will not clean the database. And the next test, if you, for example, will be checking how many entities you can see on the data grid, it will fail because you should, for example, create the entity and the entity would be already there. So it is important that if it failed, you could recreate the database from the dump. And so the big point is that you can read it easily, the Behat test, and you could also very simply write it. I will fix my scenario, the environment in the evening and show it to you tomorrow at the very beginning. So those steps will be hinted for me. So most of the steps you need to test even your own functionalities are already here. So clicking a button, navigating to the menus, going with data grids or checking some values, everything is already defined and it's human readable. And with those hints, you can write the test actually just from the very beginning. You just configure the Behat's project and you can start writing the test. Of course, sometimes you will have your custom functionalities with different markup, and then you will just have to define them for the Behats, like what selectors should be used for specific elements. But still, it's very simple. Once you done few tests or analyze the few tests that we created, it will be really a moment to start writing the Behats, and they will test the most important parts of your application. So if you only have to choose one, I would go with Behats, but it's really up to you and up to your specific cases. Here, as I said, for example, he started 2 sessions, one as an admin, the second one as the user. Oh, actually, okay, it's re-indexed right now, and it means that I should be able to add new steps. Okay, you can see, for example, I want to click some elements. So I type, I click, and sorry, and he will give me a hint if I click a string, if I click a product of some modal window matrix. There are steps for most of the actions you can do in the system. And if you get, this is actually just a standard Behat support plugin, it will just help you write the test. As you can see, this is human readable language. So this is the huge benefit of the Behat. And it also tests the real application. So it will be my recommendation. If you have to pick one type of test, I would go with this one. Okay, let's continue. And so, how to run tests? As you could see, I can run them by PHP unit. I can run them from CLI like I did with the Behats, and they are integrated with PhpStorm. So whichever is the best for you. On CI, for example, they will be probably executed from the command line. Now, how to write a good test? First of all, and this is like the most important, they should be isolated. If a test fails, it is super important to understand why it failed and to be able to fix it quickly. Otherwise, if the test just failed and I need to find out what this test was checking, it is waste of time. So tests should have atomic approach. I test one thing and then I write another test for another thing. And if a test fails, it should be self-explanatory what is not working. Okay. Also, very important, you should always validate the initial state and then the result. If you only validate the result, you may not be sure that this test is failing because of its own functionality or because it got the wrong state at the very beginning. Okay, so after operation, and you should validate the state, but also initial one. Then, as I said, you should not just cover the positive scenarios. You should always think about the edge cases and the negative cases and then cover them. And they should be describing what they are testing. So usually the method should not be like, the method name should not be too long, okay? For me, for tests, this can be not always true. So for example, here you can see a test with a ridiculously long method name. Right? Test return config provider not found exception on non-existing provider. If I would see such a method, probably I would just write some comment about it. But for the test, it's very useful because if this test fails, just from the method name, I know what's wrong. Okay, I just know what this test is doing. I could add some comment, but usually we don't do this for test. So that's the test method name is self-explanatory and it helps a lot to understand what's wrong. So bad test is something just opposite. It's not isolated, it's not checking the state or the result. So it's very simple to write a test that always pass, but is it useful? It's worse than not having a test because it will not test anything and it will give you the false comfort. So think about them, have always atomic approach and validate before and after you execute the specific functionality. And there is also something that we don't think of as a test, but it is sort of a test, which is a code review. So I think that everybody works with code reviews and nowadays. Sometimes you have very small projects, and in those small projects, we create pull requests and do the self-review only. But if you work in a team, we always work with the code review. And this is awesome. Actually, if somebody gives you a negative code review, you should be happy about it because, okay, you make a mistake, but somebody spent the time and tried to help you actually to fix those mistakes, to understand what you did wrong. Of course, sometimes it's not that useful if he's just saying, this is wrong, this is not a good code review. He should point why this is wrong, and if possible, discuss the solution with you. Okay, so if you are helping a junior or you help onboard somebody to the project, you can do a live review. So you start with him and say, okay, for this project we use different approach or we use different syntax. And if this is just about the syntax, the code reviewer could and should fix it by himself, okay? You shouldn't do the negative review only because somebody is missing a space or enter, okay? Those are things that code reviewers should fix, and only if there are some serious logic issues or some not covered edge cases, then the review should be not approved and explained what's wrong. And here you have some links for our best practices and our FAQ. You can check them and maybe introduce some of them for yourself. So this is the simple workflow. So always start with the self-review. This is always good practice. So first of all, install, check in prod mode, push it, create the pull request, and before you ask for the review, go through the code you created and check if you, for example, haven't left some comment or to-dos to cover, okay? And then somebody do the code review, and there can be as many iterators as needed. It's if somebody fix the review you did and there is still something wrong, of course, you should fail it again and ask for the fix again, okay? So it's not like only one code review and then it must be perfect. If there is still something wrong, you should fix it, okay? And then when code review is passed, you can push it you can merge it. This is also why it's good to have test and continuous integration, because a lot of the things can be checked or catched before you ask your colleague for code review, okay? So something can be done automatically, which is always a benefit, because code review, we know it's time consuming. You need to switch to sometimes you have to switch the project, then you switch to your branch, install the changes, understand what you are doing, check the logic, test the functionality. There is quite a lot of time of it. We have the checklist for code reviews. I think it will be shared with the slides. And so we have the functional review, then we do the architectural implementation, then we check if the tests were added to the pull request and if the documentation was written. Of course, sometimes we will have the ticket for pull request, move this button 5 pixels to the left. Then we can skip most of those tests, and this is up to the reviewer to understand if he should perform them or not. But if this is like the complex, like the new feature, this is the steps we follow, and actually in this order. Some best practices. Set up continuous integration as soon as you can, and it should test the application in the production environment. So this is really important. If you will have any tests, it's good to run them with the continuous integration. Write Behat test if this is possible. So this is like the most crucial ones. And then cover critical parts of the functionality. So if you have new feature and it assumes that something is like required for user to be able to perform, cover this with the Behat test. Okay. So as I said, this is a very quick topic. We will skip the question and answer right now because we will talk about how we can customize Oro, and then we can have a short question and answers session at the very end, or tomorrow at the very beginning of the webinar, okay? And actually I will check, yeah, there are only 2 questions. I will answer them at the end of the webinar. So the last, but actually from my perspective, it's the funniest topic, which is how we can start extending Oro. So it should take like 20-25 minutes, so we can stay like 5-10 minutes longer, or we can finish this tomorrow at the very beginning. It's actually we'll see in a moment. So the first possible method is the way that you will start the same for the Symfony. So for example, there is a lot of services in Symfony, and you can override the service just by adding the service or the parameter, just by adding the service with the exactly same name and pointing to your class, okay? And this is not the best solution, because if there will be few overrides, only the last one will be used. So it's not extendable solution. And according to Symfony documentation, in most cases, it is enough solution. And this is true. Usually, if you override some service in your own customization, then you could modify this. You don't have to overwrite it again. But still is the simplest one, and it lacks the extendability, so we could not use it, for example. And all you have to do is to define, for example, the parameter and point it to different value. Or I can have Oro configuration provider. I will just copy this, and in my own bundle, I will add the two services and point to different class name. And my class can extend the original one, but doesn't have to. It can be really different solution. Okay, so as you can also see here, we are not using auto wiring in the core of the Oro. But you can use it in your customization. And actually in the training repository, auto wiring is being used, so you can see it works. Okay, so we do not use it because actually the Symfony recommends not to use it in the bundle application, in the application with bundles, but you can use them in your customization and it will work. Sometimes you will just have to create aliases for the existing services. And you can see this in the training repository actually. And I will show it tomorrow when we discuss the practice. Okay, so this is the simplest, but sometimes it's the enough. A little bit more complex, but still nothing really sophisticated, is the service decoration. Okay, so we can decorate the original service and still have access to it. So it's like the decorator pattern. And thanks to this, we can do many decorations to the one service and use decoration priority to order them the way you would like. So for example, we have some search service and it's in platform. And when we install the commerce, we would like to have the website search. So as I told you, there is an index for the backend and different for the frontend. So right now, let's open this in the IDE. Okay, so I created separate service name and point to which service I'm decorating. Okay, so there is a service called Oro Search Query Factory, and sorry, this is actually the class, and this is a service. And now I'm decorating it and pointing to the decorator class. As you can see, the first argument I'm passing to the class is the old service. So the logic in Symfony when you create this decorator is that the old service is available under the new service name .inner. Okay, so whenever I create a decorator to access the old one, the service I decorated, I have the service name .inner. Okay, I could change this using the decorator inner name, and then I could change this to some different string, but usually you don't have to do this. Okay, so I pass this to the query factory, and here, as this is a decorator, I have, for example, some logic. If this is search index and this is the website, I can pass it to the original service. This is not the website, and if this is not, I go with the website query factory. Okay, so here I have the condition. If the condition is met, I'm going with the new website query factory. Otherwise, I have the fallback to the service I have decorated. Okay, so this is nice, and now I will have another third type of index. I create another decorator with, for example, higher priority, and first it will be the first decorator, then the second decorator, and then it will fall back to the original service. So I can create a chain. Okay. The third possibility here, this is most complex. It's called the compiler passes. And this helps you to manipulate the service and parameters after the container was built. So I created the container, all the services was already analyzed and built, and now I can modify it. For example, I can say, hey, add a method call to this specific service. Okay, so actually let's check this in the IDE. And as you can see, it implements the compiler pass interface. But important thing is here, I have some service. So I could find it in services YAML. If you look for a service, it's good to remember that it has to be defined with the semicolon. So I just added, and you can see the search results are really narrowed down to one service. Okay, so there is a service. Okay, and I can add a method call. For example, this service is having some registry of providers, and if I would like to add additional provider, I could do this by adding additional service definition with the set method or call method. But also I could find it and use it as a tagged. For example, here I'm finding all the services tagged with this tag. There can be many of them. See, there is a lot of those. And then to the registry, I'm adding the provider. So for all the services tagged with the specific tag, I'm adding the method called add provider to this registry of the category providers. This is older implementation. Right now, thanks to the Symfony changes, I have something called tagged. And with this, for example, if I pass something like this, I will pass all the services tagged with this tag to this specific class. Okay, I will tag this iterator to iterate over those services. So I don't have to do this with compiler pass anymore, but still I can, for the very specific use cases, here I have a little bit more control over this. Another use case would be to change the class. For example, I find the definition, and for this definition, I could change the class. Registry definition, set argument, or set class. Okay, so I could really change anything in the container after it was built. So it is a little bit more complex than just overwriting the service or decorating, but it gives you really a full control over what is being done there. So yeah, this is the second example, and here I will just change a class of some, so I don't need to overwrite a whole service just to change the class. I can just find it in the container after it was built and change the class for it. We could also overwrite, for example, templates. So whenever we load parts of the bundle using this path, like Oro bundle, we can use this in controller or for the templates. We can override them, adding them in the SRC resources directory. So this is, guys, something that is very important. If you check the Symfony docs, it will tell you that for Symfony 4.4, you should be using the templates bundles, okay? And actually, we have this directory in the Oro. So it's templates bundles, but it's not always a good solution to use them. And this is the second link explains why. So if you would like to override the template in Oro, so if the template was referenced by the new annotation, so with the @ sign like this, then it will work. So it will check in the SSR resources and the templates bundles. Okay, that's perfect. But in many places in Oro or in Symfony, it is still referenced with the deprecated Symfony notation with the semicolons. So the notation like this is pointing to the same files, but different way. And if your file was referenced this way, it will not be searched for the override templates in templates bundles directory. It will only search in SSR resources. So to be on the safe side and to always make the override work, you should add your customization to this SRC resources, okay? So for example, let's check it. And I will go to the user, and there is a view page. Okay, so I'm on the user view page at the moment. I can check the user view controller is executed, there is a view action. I could go to this view controller, sorry, to the user controller view action, and check the template for it. Yeah, it's the default path, so it's user bundle resources view user view HTML. Okay. If I would overwrite it, which is not always the best solution, sometimes it's better to extend, of course, or usually it's better to extend, I could do this with the src resources. So I go to the src resources directory. Here I need to create a directory for my bundle. So the name of the bundle is Oro user bundle. So I create it. Inside I create a views, and then I need the same path. So you see I had it prefix, so it won't work, but actually if I just remove the prefix, it should load this now. So whenever we load a template and we use this notation, it will first check if there is this template in SLC resources. If it's not here, it will load one from the default path, which is Oro user bundle, resources, views, users, view html.twig. So right now it should load my template. Yeah, I've added just some additional text. And it would be awesome, but in previous versions of Symfony, we had some issues with it, with the circular reference. Okay, so to overwrite completely, it would be just, I can go to the original template, I can copy it and just paste. But this is like really copy pasting. I'm copying a lot of, it's not that much, but a lot of code just to add some additional text to one block. So this is not a good idea. The better idea would be to extend, okay? So I'm extending the template using the Twig extendability, and I'm pointing to the original template. The problem is, this, as I told you right now, whenever you use this notation, first he will look here. So actually I'm pointing to myself, and this is like the circular reference, okay? So to avoid this, actually let's demonstrate this. Yeah, it will take a while. Still loading. Okay, I will check why it's loading that much actually, but to avoid it, all I have to do is to add this exclamation mark here. So it means it will look for the original one, not here. So this way I'm extending the view template from the original bundle, not the one overwritten here. So I do not have the circular reference. And now I don't have to overwrite whole template. For example, I just change the block, breadcrumbs. I load the parent block because this the default by Twig, I can do this, and just add some additional text, add some markup, extend it any way how I want to. So I don't have to overwrite whole template. Overwriting is always bad because when you have some changes in the core, you upgrade the application and you are missing those updates because of you have overwritten the template. So you lost all the changes. If you overwrite just this block, it will still load the parent one and it will just add some additional things. So this is way better to extend than to overwrite it completely. Okay. So what you should remember here that right now it's safer to add this to SLC resources. Okay. It works the same as the templates bundles, but it works always, even if the old notation was used to reference this specific resource. Then we go with the root overwriting. It's not that common, but sometimes it is required. Just a second, guys. Okay, so for roots overriding, there are a few possibilities. First of all, controllers now we define as a services. It wasn't true in the previous versions of Oro, so it depends which version of Oro you are using. And not all controllers was already defined as service. So first of all, it depends if you want to check if you want to override the controller that is defined as a service or it's not yet. So first, it's good to check. For example, we go with this user controller. So I find the user controller. and I can find the controller's YAML in the specific bundle to check. Also, there is no link, but I can be sure by checking the controller's YAML. And here I can see that actually only the configuration controller and the security controller was defined, so I cannot override the specific controller just with the overwriting the service. Still, of course, I can customize. So the simplest way to customize just one specific root is to create a controller with the same root name. So for example, here I can create a controller, called it Acme controller, as you see it at the very beginning. And in the routing YAML, I register it the normal way. So it was commented out. So I just point to my controller, and here I use the same root name. Okay? So it was for the index. So if I go back to the user's index, I see that my controller is loaded. Okay, so I didn't have to override the whole controller. I just created new controller, registered it in the routing YAML with the new key, and it loaded my controller action. Still, if I go to any other action in this controller, the original one will be used. Okay, so I just overwritten one root just by defining the root with the same name. Please remember that whenever you create controller in the custom location, you need to point to the template. And here it is awesome because, of course, suggestions works just fine. Okay, and you have to point because by default he will look in the same bundle where you have the custom controller. But you can, of course, create custom template and point to this one if this is like really different than the original one. The second possibility would be to overwrite it just by the controller's YAML. So as you saw, the configuration controller, it was defined in the controller's YAML. So here I have the controller service. And this is using the service subscriber. We're not gonna talk about it. If you need to, you can check this in the Symfony documentation. This is pretty nice way to restrict the container, sorry, the services available for specific controller or specific service. So I have this controller. It have, as you can see, the name of the service is just the name of the, is the fully qualified class name of the controller. So if I would like to override it, I have to go to my bundle, create the controller's YAML, and here override the service. So the name of the service still have to be the same as the original one, but it should point to my class, okay? And because I would like to just extend, or sort of override one method, one action, I can extend the original controller. Okay, so I have extended the user config action. And right now, if I go to the users, it will take a while because I created the new service and he will need to rebuild it. Oh, sorry for this. If something like this happens, the console is your friend and you will see the bug in a moment after you refresh. No, it was actually just some cache not being cleared. If I click to the configuration right now, you can see that it loaded my Acme configuration controller. Okay, so I customized the specific root by overwriting the controller service. So if you would have to override some controller, you should check if this is service or not. If it's not, you could overwrite it with the routing YAML or just by using the same root name. If this is the service already, you can overwrite it using the controller's YAML and just overwrite it as any other service. Okay, guys, I think we can do the short question answer session right now and continue this topic. It's not that much left, but we are already 3 hours long, and we should stop at this because probably you are tired, and we can finish this tomorrow at the very beginning of the webinar. So please ask your question right now. Let's let me check if there are already some. Oh, only few. How do you convince team to do a testing in completely new project? Okay, so Marcos, very good question. And I don't think there is a one golden rule how you can do this. Always, will be always about budget. So your client will want the application to be really reliable without any testing. But it is really good to, for example, explain how is it change, how does it work when you would like to change some complex feature when you have tests or when you do not have. Or for example, if you would like to upgrade the application to the newer one, to compare the regression testing time with or without the test for your application. So if you have really good coverage for application, doing the regression testing is simple. If you have to cover regression testing manually, it takes a lot of time and it's error prone. So that's it. Can you show us how to run a single test? Yeah, I showed you actually. So with the Behats, I can run the single scenario. They should not run the single feature. You should not run just the single scenario because the scenarios depend on each other. So in feature, you start, for example, for creating a user entity, then you change the password for this user entity. So you could not run the scenario to change the password without running the scenario to create a user. So for the Behats, all the features should be run. You should not run the specific scenarios. And for the unit test, you can run the specific test even from the IDE. Open any, sorry. And you can run simple test here, okay? And you just execute this one simple test. Are you supposed to test the tweak? I don't think we do this right now in the newest PhpStorm. You can debug the tweak. It's not very popular to use it, but no, I don't think you have to test the tweak. About the tests, is there a documentation and could you maybe share the example you showed? Yeah, I will add the links to the documentation in the Slack community channel. And there are guidelines how to run tests for functional and the Behat tests. So this is how you configure the installation, how do you install the application, how you execute the test. And are there any guidelines given by Oro Inc. that require testing to be part of the development? Well, we cannot require. In Oro Inc., when you think about development, there are two types. So first one, we develop the product, which then is being used by other partner, other teams, or just the users. And in the product development, we have a requirement to all the feature be covered by all the tests. And we also have the services, which is like the implementation of for specific partner or client. And then this is up to the project manager, actually up to the client, what tests are being written. Can you tell us why did you use decorator? Is just decorator pattern implemented by Oro? No. So the decorated, I show you, so decorating the services, this is the Symfony functionality. And tomorrow, when we finalize this topic and I will show you the short practice, you will see the use of the decorator, for example. So decorator are really important because you do not override the functionality, you extend it. So you can create a chain of decorators, and you could not do this with overwriting the service by the service name. What other feature use the message queue? Marcos, we're gonna talk about the message queue in details in next week, and then I will probably cover your questions. Okay, guys, sorry for going a little bit longer than we expected. Tomorrow we start the same time. We're gonna finish this topic. I will then do the short practice. So the practice will be, I will show you what should be done, and then I will discuss you the solution we do. Of course, usually there is more than one solution, and there is even more than one good solution. So you can try to work with your own solution and then compare with the branches you have on the training repository. So thank you very much for joining, and talk to you tomorrow. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.